Good morning. I said, good morning. My name is Angel Bush, and I'm the founder of Black Women in Artificial Intelligence. Thank you so much for that energy. I am certainly excited to be here. I did not know I would be following Tom Brady, so thanks for that. But I am certainly excited to be here today at Emerge Americas. And the way I want to start this is to give you the genesis of Black Women in Artificial Intelligence. We were founded after I attended an event that did not fully reflect me as Angel Bush. You know what? That's not right. That's not right. This all started with me wanting to build a robot. And that robot's name was going to be Usher. Now, you guys can name your robot whatever it is you want to name him, but my robot was going to be named Usher. And Usher was going to bring me hot cocoa anytime I wanted it, okay? And so one day I started doing some research trying to determine how do you build this robot. And then I attended an event that did not fully reflect me. And so throughout the event, this is in 2019 when everyone was saying, you know, artificial intelligence is the fourth industrial revolution. And throughout the day, I heard that throughout the event. And in those moments, I said to myself, well, surely you cannot have a revolution without Black women. And that is how Black Women in Artificial Intelligence started. So again, we were founded in August of 2020. We are now a global organization. We have members on 5 continents. We're on North America, South America, Europe, Africa, and Australia. And our mission is to educate, engage, embrace, and empower Black women in the artificial intelligence sector. Now, I want to clear up some confusion. You know, there may be some confusion. I am not here for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Let me say that again. I am not here for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because at this time, those words have been used to weaponize and divide. I am here so that the women in your community and the women in my community can have access and opportunity within this space without impediments. So again, I am not here for diversity, equity, and inclusion. I am here actually to ask all of you a question. And that question today is, who is they? Now, I know some of your ears perked up because the verb and the nouns and all of that subject didn't conjugate correctly. I know that it is who are they. But I am asking you today, when it comes to ethics, who is they? We pinpoint when we can't pinpoint who's responsible for something that happens in the world, we tend to blame they. And so the question becomes, who is they? And we don't have the luxury when it comes to artificial intelligence to blame they, so what we do is we blame the machine that was created and manipulated by man for the harms that it has caused. So again, the question becomes, who is they? Who will we blame when artificial intelligence goes wrong? Who will we hold accountable when facial recognition goes wrong? When it pinpoints the wrong person and that person is sent to jail and has to prove him or herself innocent. So again, the question is, who is they? And then we have to determine in ethics and artificial intelligence, we have to ask the question, whose ethics is this based on? Is this based on a Western perspective of the way ethics are supposed to be when it comes to artificial intelligence? Who is they? And then we have to ask the question, what is your yes and what is your no? When ethics go wrong, when AI goes wrong, is it based on what happens within your community and how close it touches your community? What is your yes or your no when you are a consumer? What is your yes or your no when you are a creator? What is your yes or your no when you are an investor? When do we say no? Again, when it affects us and our community? Or do we step back and attempt to mitigate harm when we're bringing all of these different things to the forefront? Who is they? So as we continue to utilize these softwares and systems and ChatGPT and things of that nature, one of the biggest threats to all of us is going to be autonomy and ownership. Who owns your image? Who owns your likeness? Who owns your voice when they can record your voice in 3 seconds and then type in something they want you to say that you've never said in your life? Who is they? Can we answer that question, who is they? And the next thing we have to answer, yes, I have a lot of questions today, and we're going to bring out a great group who has a lot of answers. But my question to you today is, what are we as global citizens, as a global community, going to do about it? I know that people are against regulations. I understand that. I know people are against a whole lot of things happening in AI. They want it to be a free market, a free economy. You should be able to do what you want to do. And that is true to a point, because we have to consider that there are people who could potentially be harmed. And so when it comes to ethics and we talk about bias, we also have to understand, let's be truthful. We're all biased. All of us, everyone in this room is biased. And if we can start with the truth, then we can start answering the other questions in terms of who is they, who is responsible when AI goes wrong. So we're going to have a wonderful conversation to discuss who is they, and for those of you who are just saying, oh, please say it right, who are they? There you go, you can have that one. So we're gonna have some wonderful people come to the stage, and we're gonna have a wonderful conversation about ethics and AI and how we deal with the issues that come with that, whether it's regulation, who's at the table. And let me be clear when I say who's at the table, because people sometimes get this confused. I'm not concerned about being at the table. That's another thing. Without power, authority, and influence, I'm just in the room. So I don't want to be invited to the table if the invitation in the small letters does not say you have power, authority, or influence. So again, we're going to talk about all of this as the speakers come up, and they are ready in the back for this conversation. And again, we're certainly excited that you guys are here. We're gonna need more energy though. We're gonna need more energy. We're gonna need more energy. We're gonna need more energy. Let's go. Let's go. We are here for a purpose. We are here for a reason. And Dr. Ken is on his way out. You guys can go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Hey guys, let's all take a seat. I'm Mac, I'm a tech reporter at CNBC. And I want to pick out, can we do 2 quick bios and then we'll get right into the conversation and continue where you left off?
Yes.
So Kenneth, do you want to give a quick bio and then we'll go on to Frost?
Thank you very much for that. I don't know how many native Miamians there are here, but I've returned. In fact, if you're old enough, I was actually born about a kilometer from here at the old St. Francis Hospital. You see how far I've come. My job now is directing the ethics programs at the University of Miami, including a university-wide ethics program. I work with IDISC, our Institute for Data Science and Computing, and its special program in data ethics and society, and our program, our Institute for Bioethics and Health Policy, with a strong focus on the use of information technology. Thank you.
Great. Frost?
Hi everyone, I'm Frost. I'm from San Francisco and I've been working in really machine learning and AI in my entire career. And now I founded the company SocialChat.ai to really help e-commerce companies to close their purchase loop of customers using AI technology.
So I want to continue the conversation around ethics and generative AI with the story of Timothy Gebru, a highly respected leader in AI ethics research who's known for co-authoring a paper that showed that facial recognition was less accurate at identifying women and people of color, and which meant that its use could end up discriminating against them. Now, she was once Google's star ethics researcher, and we know that back in 2020, right around the time of her departure, she was working on research specifically looking at these LLMs and whether there were certain risks of these large language models. Today what we associate with these consumer-facing platforms like ChatGPT and Google's Bard, which is built on an LLM. Now, there are a lot of questions surrounding that departure, but it kind of goes to this larger question of this arms race that we've seen in the generative AI space in the last 2 months. And it's just been this unprecedented breakneck speed since February with the kickoff of ChatGPT. And I want to ask, I open this up to the panel. Did we move too quickly here? Was there enough corporate due diligence internally before this tech was unleashed on the world?
Maybe. Look, the history of our civilization is shaped by the evolution of technology. You'll forgive the old saw, but the Stone Age did not end because we ran out of stones. That humans have this inexorable desire to move forward, and right now it is moving forward, as you point out very quickly. The reason why we're here, though, is enough of us are mindful about the need every once in a while, if not to tap the brakes, to clear the windshield wipers a little. That good people of goodwill are using machines for extraordinary purposes, and they can be used to improve life on Earth. What I think a number of us are arguing about is how best to do that without impeding the evolution of technology, but without moving so fast that we can't see when we've hit the curve coming up just ahead of us. And that's a good sign. It's positive and it's wholesome. It's not that we're wringing our hands and being worried about it as much as we're saying we own this, we're going to get it right. But every new technology for 2,000 years has introduced ethical challenges for us. At eMERGE, we're actually tackling them.
Frost or Angel?
Super cool. Yeah, I think if we just look back about 10 years ago when social media just started rising, it really shaped us and really shaped how we think about privacy and data sharing. And AI definitely accelerate all this data processing and let us be able to really identify a lot of needs and really to know what works as fast as possible. I would say I'm actually very happy the progress is fast, yet we have to use definitely with caution. 12 years ago when Facebook and Twitter first started, we didn't really have any regulation around how we share any information online, what things can be posted, and over time we learned what is the base, and now there are amazing tools that we use every day to consume the base data we can get.
Well, I think a colleague of mine said the other day, was there a problem that we're trying to solve with these language models? What is the problem that we're trying to solve? I don't know whether we're trying to solve a problem, but I certainly know that we are creating problems with these, because a lot of the language models, people are taking this as gospel. You can go in and you can type something up, and then people are taking it as the truth instead of doing further research. And if you take it as the truth, for example, I ChatGPT'd, I know we say Googled ourselves, I ChatGPT'd myself, and I said, who is the founder of Black Women in Artificial Intelligence? It did not mention me once. Even when I tried to train it to say it is Angel Bush, it is not Timnit Gebru, she is the founder of Black in AI, and then it chose another African American person that was somehow I don't know, close to my position. So again, if you didn't do the research, you would probably say, oh, okay, they said Angel Bush, but that's not what ChatGPT said. So we have to do some research beyond this. You have to have domain knowledge when you're going into ChatGPT instead of thinking it has all the answers.
And there's also this question about the inputs themselves. So these LLMs are AIs that train on a huge corpus of text. You have Elon Musk threatening to potentially sue Microsoft because he says that they were scrubbing Twitter for their source of inputs. And it kind of throws open this larger question of who's meant to regulate the inputs. And if you have biased inputs, then isn't that essentially, even if you have an unbiased technology in theory, if you have the wrong inputs, then it's going to lead to this issue. So one, who regulates that? Two, how do you determine what those ideal inputs are? And is this a company problem? Is this through private companies? Is this something the government should get involved in?
Well, look, the first step in the entire process is then identifying what are the ethical issues. They may have to do with bias. But even if we were to solve that problem, and near as I can tell, your country is still struggling with that, we've got interesting issues about the appropriate use and appropriate users of technology in energy, in transportation, in communication, in health and medicine. The FDA, for example, has come to the conclusion that software might be a medical device. Actually, it regards it as a medical device. How we get this right is going to require people of goodwill who understand that the reason why I'm not allowed to drive 70 miles an hour in a 30 mile an hour zone is not to impede on my liberty or my freedom of choice. It's because I live in a community of other people and we actually need to get along with each other, and so we adopt certain rules. When it comes to a computer program, running a car or guiding a doctor or a nurse in a hospital, it is not unreasonable to say, what are the standards that should govern this? And that standard is going to need to have some force behind it. I don't get to say, I want different standards than you or you. And when we do that in an appropriate way, and this is what we're doing in South Florida, what the University of Miami is doing with its other academic institutions. I had dinner with a colleague at FIU last night. We have a lot of good universities in South Florida, and we're all thinking these questions. How do we get it right, advance technology, and do it without worsening disparities, and also without introducing problems that we didn't anticipate correctly? There are ways of doing that, and we are working on them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think really, like you just said, it is an unbiased engine, but how do we make sure the input is accurate and with all the sources? I can give an example, like a completely wrong information can get retweeted 5,000 times just because the way they write it is very controversial and very engaging, yet the right information, say actually posted by a medical professional, can have only 500 followers and no one is looking at it. And when we feed into the engine, it is basically thinking, okay, more people were engaging, there were more references, this is probably more accurate. But if we add another layer, we always check with the FDA side first. We always check with like BBC, like Bloomberg, CNBC, all these are really, really like solid publisher first, and put that as a guardrail, and then we'll have way more accurate information. So I think it's really how we use it, exactly.
If I might, as a friendly amendment, note the following. The news of the week or the news of the day is changing pretty quickly. You were right. This is unusually rapid change. One of the bits of news this week is a very large vendor has created an arrangement with a large manufacturer of electronic health records so that ChatGPT-4 might actually be used by doctors and nurses in the clinic. Are you okay with your doctor and nurse doing that without appropriate training? What would be the appropriate training? What's the difference between a machine and a human diagnosing you and coming up with a prognosis for whatever your malady is? We regulate professions pretty well already, but right now, a lot of people would say, is the research that we do at our university all the time, is that been brought to bear for this? And the answer is, we're not entirely sure. We'd like to see more of it. Angel, you mentioned transparency earlier, and that's a really important point. If we're going to get this right, we need to turn our cards face up.
You know, there was research that came out from Stanford and Google this week. They essentially looked into a Sims kind of simulation where you had these non-playable characters, these NPCs that were, they had these predefined and distinct roles, and they came out with these emergent behaviors. And it goes to another example. Someone with GBT was creating these autonomous characters, again, with these predefined, distinct perspectives that they were coming in with, and then reaching some sort of mediation among them. So you had 5 different distinct perspectives arriving to a different conclusion out of that. And I guess my question is, can you automate a way to eliminate bias by bringing people to the table, like through these technologies that are able to kind of mediate these different perspectives?
I don't think so. There always needs to be a human in the loop, because these systems don't think. These systems don't have emotions. They pull in information that they've been fed, and the data is labeled. So if you label something a cat, and it's not a cat, but that's how this data was situated and gathered, then you don't have a human in the loop to say, excuse me, this is not a cat, this is actually a dog. And that means that the data was not cleaned prior to the release of the software or the systems. So we must begin to consider that if we take a human out of the loop, then we're taking any emotion, then we're taking anything that may divert from a particular situation. So we have to have a human in the loop.
And you know, there was reporting from both CNBC and Bloomberg kind of looking at what was being said by former and current employees at Google who just felt that there were serious concerns around Bard and its rollout. Some people were cited as calling it a pathological liar. And it goes again to this idea of who's responsible, and is that a corporate responsibility? And Kenneth, you mentioned the FDA potentially folding software approvals under their umbrella. Other people, Chamath was talking about creating a parallel regulatory agency similar to the FDA, where it's comprised of a panel of PhDs and industry experts, and just kind of being proactive in the regulation space, not to muzzle it, but to create certain ground rails. Is that the way to go? Like, who's responsible here?
Quick accusations of muzzling and stymieing are easy to make. We enjoy robust free enterprise here. On the other hand, if I want to sell you my car, and the car was in a terrible accident that I don't disclose to you, that deception is and ought to be against the law. We call that fraud. Given some of the ways the tools can be used to deceive people, and remember, you can be deceived not simply by lying to someone, by withholding information or selectively presenting it to them. Some of those standards we have that fall under the force of law. Some of them are our cultural custom. In other words, it's generally speaking, I won't have a surprise birthday for you. I might deceive you about where the surprise is going to be. But otherwise, it's really difficult to justify deception. And I think one of the great concerns we all have now is how easy it is, and how unfortunately fertile it is to use some of these tools for bad purposes. The point at which it rises to the level of fraud is an interesting question. And we're sorting that out now as a civil society. Under what circumstances ought I be regulated and or punished and or sanctioned? That we're having the debate, I think, is the most important thing to do. But I think it's not entirely a brave new, a world we have not charted before. This is not our first rodeo when it comes to a new technology and how we ought to regulate it. And standards, by the way, go a long way in that direction.
Yeah, I think if we think AI as a really, really complex machine, to your point, you need actually certain abilities, and not only in technical abilities, but like really the right judgment to operate it. So I think ChatGPT give people a very easy access to it, but a lot of people, they never got a training, to your point, how to read the results and do independent research. To Ken's point, they may not understand how the result was generated. So I would say if the company is employing AI into their core business practice, it's almost their responsibility to hire these AI experts and make sure it is really run smoothly, instead of just got a bunch of interns putting the query in and just took all the results out as the single source of truth and just say, oh, I just called the OpenAI API, so I don't know anything, and shift the responsibility away.
I think you're kind of getting at this dynamic where it's, is it the responsibility of a private company to just have their own internal teams to evaluate this versus the idea of anyone can create their own medication or their own software, but if you want to commercialize it, that's where the FDA comes in, and that's where ostensibly some sort of regulatory agency that specializes in AI in the US could help mediate what goes to market and what's scaled. Do you have any thoughts on? Yeah,
they have.
It's also where businesses that practice with integrity have discovered that getting this right is good business. It's not an impediment to their entrepreneurial spirit, that markets are created by trust and trustworthiness. If you really want to make money off of this, then do it the right way. There's plenty of money out there for everybody to make. You do not need to cut those kinds of corners. And good business people will say some standards and some regulation is actually good for us and will help us. The great Baltimore fire of 1900-something or other, a terrible fire. Somebody flipped a cigarette into a grate, building went on fire. Speaking of social change, somebody flipped a cigarette into a grate on the sidewalk. Y'all seen that lately? No. The point is the fire is raging across Baltimore, and they're calling for fire departments from Washington and New York, and all the fire departments are sending their engines, and they all get there, and all their hoses are a different size. In other words, they couldn't put out the Baltimore fire because there were no standards for the diameter and couplings on fire hoses, and the city burned. No one then said, boy, these standards for fire hoses are going to impede our entrepreneurial spirit and impede our business. On the contrary, it produced really good business. And if you're anticipating the consequences of the use of a technology, you're going to get it right by trying to figure out what's transparent, what's in the interest of the community you're trying to serve, and what, frankly, is going to be fair for everybody.
One dynamic we were talking about backstage is this, give him a round of applause for that. Was this idea that you no longer need 50 people to get to an MVP. You don't need $100 million checks from VCs to be the next big startup. I mean, if you can do, and there's, two lines of thought out of this. One, does that actually make it a more, equitable process, more decentralized? You have 100 teams of 1 to 2 people that you're seeding because you can automate, code, and you don't have to have these fleets of 10x developers to create and bring a product to market versus having all these centralized big tech entities. So can this actually flip the workforce narrative on its head, and that you're eliminating jobs, but are you almost decentralizing and making, access to the startup scene more equitable? I throw that to anyone who wants to.
Yeah, I think it goes both sides. I think one is it would definitely make the next giant, huge company, just like Facebook or Google. It can be OpenAI. A lot of data, a lot of applications are all on AWS. So I think one thing very interesting is big companies will get bigger and more efficient because of this technology, and they have all the data. So their results are just going to be better. But at the same time, it is easier for startups without like a lot of prepaid machine learning and AI talent. They can just try it out and see how they can make their business better. So I think what is interesting is whenever there's a new technology, whoever runs fast gets the first mover advantage. And I already started seeing people, instead of hiring copywriters, they use AI to generate all their marketing copies.
The problem with a first mover, and that's a good business strategy, I reckon, but remember, and this is sort of a shout out to our colleagues in business, in government, and in academia who are studying this. I mean, it turns out that generative predictive transform, the software, the original software is actually easily accessible. We can start doing better science around this to find out what works best in different environments. Sometimes the first mover ends up like what was that cartoon character that's running along chasing the coyote, and he goes out over the edge of the cliff and his legs are going like this and he looks down. First movers sometimes stumble. That's okay, we like that for the business spirit, but ultimately, and at least the track record in our civilization suggests that, is that when academia, when industry, and when government partner with each other to do more science around this, we get better outcomes. What we're trying to do here in our institutions in South Florida is ensure that the values that I think are pretty well shared, I think we share common values, don't let anybody tell you otherwise, are being embedded into this research and into the applications of the science.
We've been talking a lot about practitioners in the space and the people who are bringing these products to market, but on the flip side, users and equitable access to these tools. Like, that was something that you and I were talking about backstage a bit. Do you have more thoughts on that?
I think it's important that we all have open opportunities to access this. And I know there are open APIs and things of that nature, but we have to understand where we are right now. What does the community look like right now? And again, I talked about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I know sometimes we forget retention, but again, I'm not here for that, because usually that doesn't come with power, authority, or influence. So I'm just in the room just to be there. And that is not what I'm looking to do. When it comes to artificial intelligence and people building different systems, we have to make sure that there is a diverse workforce in the room, because when we walk into the room, and I believe this, your product just got better. So if you want your bottom line to get better, you'll definitely, yes, you can clap for that because it's true. If you want your bottom line to get better, diversify the people that are in the room and give them power, authority, and influence.
That's a really good point. You know, kind of coming back to this idea of where the U.S. is in this larger AI, race. People can leave. You know, people can create this content elsewhere. We were talking about the fact that you can't patent the algorithms themselves, and so I think it comes back to this question of are we even prematurely creating too many rules? And I know that you were saying that it's an easy case to make stifling development by creating these guardrails, but we are moving at a breakneck pace. Like, it was what, 1 year between iPhone 1 and 2, and it was all but a few weeks between these different iterations of ChatGPT. And I guess my larger question is, yes, the tech is moving quickly. Do we need to? Is it premature to have these rules in place here? Are we going to scare off talent? Are we going to lose our edge in this race in the U.S. if we are too aggressive on that front?
One of the challenges that we face, and the United States of America faces it, but so do our colleagues and competitors in Asia and Europe and Africa and South America. If this is seen as some sort of opportunity to accelerate the clash of civilizations, then we'll all lose. Either we figure out how to do this ensemble. The competition does not necessarily require that someone die at the end of the game. This is not the Hunger Games. This is an opportunity for humanity to use an exciting new tool to improve life for lots of people. We're not all going to get rich on this. But the air of gold rush about it is worrisome. There are environmental consequences to this. There are social consequences to it, and I don't think regulation is the right word, because it has a bad connotation. You might frame it as competitive cooperation. Obviously, we're not going to be fixing prices or anything, but we are going to be sharing what we care about in our communities. Do you have a problem with the environment in your community? We're using AI right now to try and solve problems in this town. In fact, a couple hundred meters that away, we've got an ocean that's a little higher than it was when the eMERGE first met. It doesn't matter who wins the software race, who the first mover is, and who makes the most profit, if we can't solve those problems. And so I think that one, without being Pollyannish or screaming for too much regulation or control, can say, if we don't figure out a way to cooperate on this and realize the benefits of the technology without fouling our own nest again, then it won't matter who the first mover was or how cool tomorrow's app is.
And I think that, a lot of stories come out with, oh, look at this cool venture that popped up overnight with somebody who knows nothing about code that now created a new social media network using ChatGPT. But I wonder, for you two, Angel and Frost, are there other real world examples of just in the last 2 months, tech that you didn't, the people are using this tech in ways that has just been transformative to you? You cited the example of how it's being used in your own backyard in Miami. I'd just be so keen to hear if there are any examples that have stood out.
Yeah, so we're in Miami, so we can talk about fashion. So before you hire a lot of models taking photos, like demoing your product. And now all these photos can be 100% generated by AI, any race, any gender, any age, different height, different weight, and then it just looks as good as if you hire a real model. But to Ken's point, I also want to say for this, only if I have a sustainable strategy, it comes to the long-term business success as well. So when they are deploying all this, it's actually freeing the creative director's time to think about something strategically, not to replace these people, right? Because just to repetitively doing Photoshop in these photos is not fun for these human beings either. So I think that's a really good application and really transforming our online shopping experiences.
Yeah, I think for me, along with Frost, I think Mid-Journey, some of you have experimented with Mid-Journey to create art, and I know there's a debate on whether it's real art or not, but I think Mid-Journey is one of those things that is going to affect a lot of communities in terms of jobs. Graphic designers, if you're a graphic designer, pay attention. If you're an artist, pay attention. It's a lot of jobs that will be transformed based on Mid-Journey. It's a wonderful software, but again, you have to determine what your yes and your no is. Whose community does it affect, and if it doesn't affect your own, are you going to stop using it, or are you going to stop investing in it? So we have to make some decisions, and really quickly, because everything is moving at the speed of light, it appears.
Real quick, because we're down to our last 5 seconds. What's keeping you up at night? Like, you know, specifically within generative AI, the pace at which we're going, the ethics side of it. Just any final words?
I think what's really keeping me up at night is what I said earlier, our autonomy and our ownership of our images and our voices and things of that nature. I think that's going to become a civil rights issue very soon, but pay attention. If someone can copy your voice, what are they typing in that's going to have you saying something you've never said? Criminal justice system. The police can certainly use it and have a person who's accused of a crime say something they've never said before. So we have to be aware of all the things that could potentially happen with this software.
Yeah, I think AI really just to help us to free up a lot of time and not to replace the people who are actually making strategic and ethical decisions. And with that, I actually think we can do more creative and more meaningful work for everybody.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that when we are at our best, yeah, we sometimes sell a lot of stuff to each other, but we can do that without manipulating each other. That at the seam between technology and society, the ability of humans to manage those kinds of changes and that technology and that technological growth and evolution is something that we have a good track record, generally speaking, in putting our shoulder to that wheel. It requires wedding values with aspirations. And I hope on a positive point to say,
yes,
we've got this.
We've got it.
Thank you so much to my panel and to the Emerge Americas Conference. Thank you guys for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mackenzie.